Hello again, everybody, and welcome. You are listening to episode 14 of the Dead Money Podcast. Why I'm telling you that this time, I don't really know, but maybe you do. Anyway, so wow. Well, I think it's about time for my unplanned poker vacation to end, and I guess this is all typical. These breaks start without a plan, and they often end that way. I always get reminded of how much I love poker whenever I find myself going out of town but still wanting to play a little bit. Now, I haven't left Vegas since coming back from New York a couple weeks ago, but I've been totally not into playing besides putting in a handful of short sessions at 1-3, just so I can get some action. But when I play small stakes, or even for no stakes, like when it's just play money, I still try my hardest to win. I take it just as seriously because I am every bit as interested in trying to solve the puzzle and make the correct decision as I am when I'm playing my usual games. And I know tons of regs, including people who aren't even that good, in my opinion, who like to get all cavalier when they play lower. You know, they play spewy on purpose and almost like they're showing off like this is too small for them to try their hardest. And they claim they're just having fun, and maybe they are. I'm not saying they're not. But what I'm saying for myself is that has never interested me. Trying to play well is the only thing that has ever seemed fun for me, and I guess that just hugely reiterates that I must just love the game in spite of how horrible it tends to be. Now, over the years, I've taught plenty of people how to play before, just one-on-one. Most of those times it was a woman, since I am so very flavorful. But even then, I'm trying too, with no money on the line. I still try to adjust and react to whatever they're doing, and it is really amazing to watch someone play poker for the very first time. George Carlin had a great line, which wasn't funny, it was just profound. He said, "The best thing about anything is not knowing what it is," and that is exactly what's going on for someone who's literally never taken a hand of poker before. And it's really neat to see who starts out being loose and reckless and who starts out beyond that by trying to be really careful. But whatever they gravitate to naturally, some of the hands they turn over at Showdown are mesmerizing. And it's hilarious because you get so used to what you see every day, but then suddenly when you're facing someone who's just brand new to poker, it's like watching a baby play with a new toy. It's pure innocence, and you just have no idea what they're going to do. Anyway, so it was Sunday night, and I wasn't even planning to play, but I changed my mind and decided I'm going to go to Resorts World and play 4 hours of 1-3. Now, usually I don't want more than 2, but tonight, I was feeling a little bit extra. I know my 5-10 games at the Bellagio aren't that far away, but I'm still not ready to launch, so I'd like to play some small stakes. And this hasn't been so completely rare. I mean, in my last 4.5 years of play, since I came back from my extended break, I've averaged a little more than 2 hours a month at 1-3. But none of the time I put in at any of those sessions proved to be anywhere near of an interesting evening as this session turned out to be. So, buckle up. So I started a little bit before 11 p.m., and when I got there, the first thing I did was table change because I saw that Angry John Monette was playing 1-3. Now, if you don't know who Angry John Monette is, he plays a lot of mixed game tournaments, and he plays quite a bit of nosebleed mixed games as well, cash games. Or at least he did in December of 2018, and then continuing through the winter of 2019. I was dealing poker at the Bellagio at that time, and I quit in February, so I don't think I was there for more than 10 weeks, but in that time, I dealt to Angry John in Bobby's room, now known as the Legends room, a lot. And these mixed games were at least 2,000, 4,000, and sometimes they were high as 3,000, 6,000. Now, like I once did, you might be wondering why his nickname is Angry John, and, well, the first day I dealt to him, it took me about 6 seconds to figure that out. There is no bigger and nastier nitpick stickler in demanding the dealer do everything completely perfectly and by the book than this guy. And he's a huge asshole about it too. And that, of course, is only going to make a nervous dealer even more nervous. So really more so than him being an asshole, he's kind of just an idiot for thinking this is going to help get him what he wants. And in fact, the Bellagio had already barred him for a full year due to excess berating of dealers. But that suspension was over now, and What I got was apparently the watered-down version of Angry John. Now, my first day dealing at the Bellagio, I went into Bobby's room towards the end of my shift. The game was Raz, which is a stud game. And I think I did something out of order in preparing to deal the hand. I think I cut the deck and then pulled the antes in, but you're always supposed to cut the deck last and then deal. So I cut the deck, and then I guess the top card was like 1/100th of 1 millimeter off the card below it, and Angry John immediately jumped on me, carrying on like, "What are you doing? You see this is fucked up because now my first card is exposed," and it's like, whoa, Jesus. It was like getting this massive gust of wind blown in your face. Now, Angry John was in seat 1, and since stud games don't have a button, seat 1 will always be dealt the top card when the hand begins. So that was how we met. And then the rest of the down went, I don't know, fine enough, I guess. I made it back in for the second day. But when I went to push into Bobby's room to deal the mixed game, then, on my second day, I'm just standing behind the current dealer, and Angry John looks up and sees me, and then he exclaims to the whole table, it's like, oh my God, they're bringing us the guy who has never, ever dealt a hand of poker. And I just started laughing. I thought that was hilarious. And I could just never catch a break with this guy. Every fucking day, my string of tables always ended up with me in Bobby's room at some point. And out of all the dozens of 30-minute rotations I dealt to Angry John, I don't know if I kept him completely silent the whole down even one time. But that's not even a commentary on me, because most dealers can't. Now, for as much as I would have rather just never had to see him again, Angry John really didn't bother me that much. I really don't, mind him. I don't think he's, this total piece of shit. I just think he's, he's a little nuts. Everyone knows him, knows he's a little nuts. He knows he's a little nuts. So, yeah, I mean, he bothered me a little bit at first, but believe it or not, I do have the right personality dispositions for dealing poker, because when dealing is my mindset, as opposed to playing, all the bullshit dealers have to take just rolls right off me. It's easy for me to ignore until it gets out of hand, because I know what the players are going through, so I know what they want to see and what they don't want to hear, so I could handle Angry John because I know what my job is supposed to. I know how I'm supposed to do the job. Now, another reason I was able to handle Angry John was because 95% of the time he criticized me for something minor. He was right. So I never really had a reason to talk back to him anyway. But out of all the minor itty-bitty things he very rudely made a life and death scene over, I never fucked up anything significant. I never screwed up the pot. I never exposed a card during a hand, and I never burned and turned too early. And if you could avoid doing all three of those things, then how bad can you really be doing? One time, Doyle Brunson thought I shorted him a $500 chip in one of the split pot games. The extra chip was supposed to go to him, and I gave it to him, but he thought I gave it to the other guy. So they checked the cameras and confirmed that I was right, and then Doyle was a bit perplexed. That was a nice little feather in my cap, getting this little victory over Doyle Brunson. But anyway, the funniest thing about Angry John is, for as unnecessarily over the top and critical he constantly was, and no one else in the game ever said anything to the dealer, Angry John also gave you credit when credit was due. And when you deal this game, whoever wins the first pot pays the time for the whole table and tips you $25 on top of it, and then that's it. You don't get any more tips. If you do, it's just gravy. Well, not only did Angry John always make sure the dealer got their quarter chip, go figure that he was the only one who would occasionally throw me an extra $5. But it didn't matter because he still couldn't stand it when I was in the box. He once complained to the floor that, he brought the floor into the room and he was just yelling that I'm new and that they're putting me in there every day. And something, he might have a point there. I really wasn't that bad of a dealer. I couldn't have been that bad. I mean, but the Bobby's Room players are paying the most time in addition to playing the highest stakes. So, maybe the Bellagio should be cycling in only their top dealers with the most experience. I mean, it would make sense for the reason of accommodating the players, and plus the dealers are going to make more. Those dealers are going to make more money because you're not going to average $25 a down on any other table. I don't care how big your tits are. So anyway, Angry John was born in 1982, which made him about 36 during this time. And, I never let him get to me. I always acted professional in putting up with him. I spoke when he needed me to speak, and I would look him in the eye, and I would always thank the table whenever I pushed out. And I did that for every table. And even though he didn't care so much for my dealing, I got the sense he at least respected me because of how I always handled him. And in fact, right before I quit, like at the end of one particular down, he threw me an extra $5 and said, "Whatever you did today, just keep doing that." Now, even that he couldn't say without putting like a minor condescending spin on it, but it's okay. I'm not going to push my luck with him. I was just amazed that I finally satisfied him. I don't know what happened. I mean, I don't know. I guess I was just on a dealer heater that day where I didn't overlook anything, no matter how minuscule. So now, 6 years later, here's a nosebleed mixed game cash player on a 1-3 no limit table. And I wanted a piece of Angry John. And not even because I hated him. I really didn't. You know, once I got used to him and the way he is, and just dealing mixed games every day, I just thought, all right, whatever. This guy just has some very particular issues when it comes to dealers. But now he's doing what I'm doing tonight, and that's playing a small six game he wouldn't normally play. And I got the hopeful idea that maybe he's not taking it seriously. Or that even if he is, maybe he's not a great no-limit cash player anyway. Now, when I transferred into the game, I saw he had about $800 or $900. In fact, half the table was at least $800 deep. And this is a $400 max buy-in, so this is already exciting. Now, I decided I wasn't going to address him as Angry John at any time unless he provoked me. But I didn't expect that because I never saw him get angry with opponents, only the dealers. So I was just going to act like I didn't know him. And I figured it's quite unlikely that he recognizes me, especially since I'm not wearing my Bellagio dealer pajamas. But the first thing that happened between he and I was he came back from a break and posted in the cutoff. I had 4-3 suited in the big blind and checked. And I think the board ran like 10-10, king, king, 8. And there were 4 players. No one bet until the button bet the river. John was the last one to fold, and he showed 4-3 offsuit and said, "You got me," to the guy who was about to win the pot. I said, "I had the same hand, but mine was suited." And he laughed and then said, "Every river card we're going to be playing the board unless it's a deuce." That's actually not correct. A 3 would also present that scenario, but I didn't think of that until now. In the moment, though, I said I was rooting for a deuce, and he laughed again. So how about that? Look at me having multiple friendly moments with the infamous dealer-hating Angry John. But telling this little story reminds me of something else. I had 4-3 suited in the big blind, and I'm just wondering, what the fuck is it with regs and their infatuation with this hand? In the last couple of years, I can't tell you how many times I saw regs who win that were either limp calling this hand from early position, opening it from early position, or 4-betting it. People, this hand sucks ass. I do not know why there are so many people who think their post-flop prowess makes this hand worth playing. I know there's a time and a place for every hand, but oh my god, left and freaking right, people are getting dealt 4-3 suited and acting like it's a lock to flop a steel wheel. I fold this hand from every spot except the button, or unless the button is like a top 5 rock in all the world. If that's not the case, no. Not even no thanks, just no. Anyway, so I was certainly relishing any possible opportunity to play a pot with Angry John, whether he's trying or not. I wasn't going to force anything to happen, but if he ever said any sort of nasty shit to me, if say he started bitching about some $200 pot he lost, then I was ready to rumble. And he'd be at a disadvantage because I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say in this argument before he even knows it's going to happen. I was going to troll the shit out of him about how he plays these nosebleed stakes where the small blind is more than double the max buy-in on this game, but he's crying about this. And then ask him, you going to blame the dealer for that too, since you blame them for everything else? But like I said, I wasn't going to force anything like this because that defeats the whole purpose. But I was definitely halfway hoping for him to say something to me, just because it would have been funny. But this night wasn't going to be about Angry John Manette, though. No siree. Tonight, this was going to be about Angry Dan Arfin. So on my left was this woman. It wasn't super easy to see what she looked like because she was wearing these big, dark sunglasses and a baseball cap. Now, the cap was not of a baseball team. It was just a cap. And she looked like maybe she could have been a mix of white and Hispanic. I couldn't really tell. The only thing that was clear was her lips looked like a blimp. That's how much lip filler she had. And you probably already guessed it, she was drinking. Now, she hadn't been loud or obnoxious, but she had energy. I'd say I was playing for about 20 minutes and nothing had happened, really. Nothing crazy. Then came an early position raise to $10, and there were 3 callers. I was in the small blind with pocket nines, and I 3-bet to 70. And this woman hadn't been inactive since I sat down, but she hadn't done anything dramatic either, nothing too fishy. But then she cold calls to 70. And gets back to the raiser, who went into the tank for a little bit. After a little while, I flashed him one glance and decided if he does anything, I'm going with this hand. Then a moment later, he folded. So did everybody else. So, heads up we go. And I really love the flop. It was 2-3-5 rainbow. The pot is around 165, and I jammed right here, 366. I did this because if she has me beat, I'm probably getting stacked no matter what I do. But if she doesn't, she may just decide to call it off with a big ace because of her outs. Or if she has pocket sixes through pocket eights, she might call it off with those hands too, hoping to see me show up with a big ace. So she thinks for a little while. She calls. The board ran out with nothing memorable, and I won a pot that was just about $900. The dealer pushed it to me, and I tipped him $3. Now I was in seat 5, I think, which means she was in seat 6. And when I gave him the $3, I didn't stack them. I threw them to him the way everyone does when they tip. So in other words, all 3 chips were clearly visible. Stevie Wonder would have been able to tell that I tipped him $3. But instead, immediately following this, the woman says in a most derogatory tone, "Only $1? Here's 2 more." And she tipped the dealer $2 extra so that he would now have gotten $3 from this hand, except now he's gotten $5 because I already gave him 3. Now, this type of behavior, someone belittling what you tip to make you look like a cheap fuck in front of the entire table, is one of those things where, I guess on one level it's ignorable because it's just a completely idiotic thing to say. But at the same time, are you fucking kidding me? It's bad enough that she already opened her mouth at all, but on top of that, she's wrong. And of course, she's dead wrong to even think of saying something like that, even if I had only tipped $1. It's so funny how random people who don't play poker kind of just assume that the high-stakes players must tip absolute piles when they win, when the truth is, it's the opposite. Now, I can understand the linear thinking from someone who doesn't play. They figure more money won means more money tipped, but no, that's not what it means. The biggest tips are always coming in the 1-3 games because so many of these people are only in it for recreation and fun. They don't expect anything great to happen. And just quite simply, they aren't even used to having any amount of extra money in their life that's exciting. So when they win a $500 pot, now they're like, holy shit, here's $10, here's $20. But when you go to the no cap games and see a $5,000 pot or even like a $20,000 pot, oftentimes the player will only tip $1 and they'll do it like it was the most normal thing they've ever done. And everyone else in the game will act like it's the most normal thing they've ever seen because they're respectful. Now, a lot of dealers don't realize that pro poker players spend thousands of dollars a year on tipping. It's not the same thing as playing just a couple times a year. So this just becomes a basic principle of economics. When you buy either an item or a service in bulk, like the way a pro poker player does with poker dealers, you get a discount. You don't have to pay as much because you're there all the time. So while the dealers are always going to understandably root for the big tippers to win, they also need to realize that the regs are tipping thousands of dollars over a year, whereas each individual recreational player is tipping nothing, absolutely nothing in comparison to that. They just have a higher average tip per hand because they don't play that much. But true as this all is, none of it even matters because it's not even applicable to this situation. And it's extremely and grotesquely out of line for a player to make a comment like this. And this isn't the first time. 6 years ago, I went to Boulder Station way out in Henderson to play for a couple hours just because I'd never played there before. And even though I'd been living in Vegas for over 10 years by this point, I somehow didn't realize that this casino is just kind of in the hood off Boulder Highway, and I should expect a lot of trash to be in this place. So I was playing 1-2. I'd actually just sat down, and I immediately won a big pot of at least, I don't know, $500, maybe even $700. I'm not sure. But I was just pulling in the pot, and I hadn't even finished stacking the chips yet. I just wanted to do that first before I tipped. What is that, a big fucking deal? But while I'm doing this wrinkled fucking white guy with shaggy hair starts scolding me across the table about taking care of the dealer. And I almost wanted to stiff the dealer just to tilt and spite this guy, but I didn't do that. So I throw him $2, a big blind. And he says, $2. Then he asked me if I was homeless. And then the very next hand, I lost a really big pot, and I think it was against this guy I just beat. Now that part I don't remember, but either way, had to have been karma, right? So I was pretty pissed at this woman because a comment like that, it's all kinds of wrong. Her getting the amount wrong was the least of it. Now, I could have gone into a whole long speech about what a dumb fuck she is, but I didn't feel like doing all that. And plus, as I said in a recent episode, I tend to keep things succinct anyway whenever I have to either tell a player off or at least make a smart-ass remark. So what I did was, I leaned over and got kind of close to her ear and said, first of all, it was $3, not $1. Second of all, shut up. And that is very much what this woman should have heard after practically getting on her knees and begging me to say that. Now, as I've said before, when these kinds of arguments start, it's usually hard to remember everything everyone said because you got so much emotion pumping, but I did get some of it down. And the first thing she said was, "Don't you tell me to shut up." And then I said, "I'm not telling you more than once." Then she starts saying again, "Don't tell me to shut up," and then starts getting kind of threatening when she says, "You don't want to mess with me." And to that I said, "What are you going to do?" Now, this is where things got a little misunderstood. When I said that, I was in no way challenging her physically. I didn't go to this 1-3 game to get into a fight with a woman that has too much lip filler, okay? That's not something I do. I asked her that because literally, what was she going to do? We're in a casino. You're going to attack me right here? Yeah, sure. Years and years ago, when I was like 20, maybe 21, I was playing at Turning Stone in way upstate New York, which is on an Indian reservation, so you can play when you're 18. And I got into it with some other idiot. And then he says to me, he's like, "I'm going to put you through the window." And to that I said, "Oh yeah, that should go over really well with the casino." So that was exactly what I meant. These people talk shit like this because they know they're not going to do anything. And that's what I was giving back to her. But she kept on with it. Now she starts telling me how she can fuck me up and she's going to fuck me up and that she was in the Air Force. Now, when she said she was in the Air Force, I said to her, "Okay, but right now we're on the ground." And that was definitely my favorite line of this entire exchange. A couple of people laughed when I said that. But she kept going on some more about how she's going to mess me up and that I was never in the military. Then the dealer started trying hard to put a stop to this. He said, "Okay, guys, that's enough. I see both sides." He even said to me, kind of softly, he's like, "Come on, it's a woman." I said, "I don't care." And I still don't care. I'm not talking to her this way because she's a woman. I'm talking to her the same way I'd say this to any man because she's a fucking asshole. But I think the dealer said that because maybe he thought I was being a little threatening when I said, like, "What are you going to do?" That's my only guess. Whatever. So I doubled up as a small blind. Next hand comes and I've got Queen Jack of clubs on the button. There's a raise to $7 and 4 people called. Now this was the first raise I saw that wasn't at least $10, so I got confused for a second. So I asked the dealer, I said, "Is that a $7 raise?" And then the woman, who hasn't had enough yet, shouts at me. She's like, "Yeah, it is. Pay attention." So I 3-bet to $50, and now the woman snap shoves. It folds back to me, and I asked the dealer, "How much is it?" And she starts saying it's about blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember what she said because I cut her right off and said, "I was talking to the dealer, not you. Pay attention." So now we're really going tit for tat here. It's getting pretty petty. Now, in hindsight, I think I have to call much faster than I actually did. Believe it or not, I almost folded. But I didn't because I stopped and realized that the jam was only $174 total from her, so I'm getting about 2-1. And I figure I'm going to be at least 40% in a lot of spots. And plus, she's tilting. You have to figure she's tilting and could easily just be punting with anything. So I may even have the best hand. So I call. I think the board ran out 8 high. It paired one of the cards. 3 hearts came. I don't even think there was a black card, never mind a club. And all she had was a straight. The flop was 4, 5, 6, and she said I flopped the nuts as she turns over the 8-7 offsuit. Okay, so she got some of it back with this double up. Karma biting me once again. After that, she took a little break. Then a couple others left, including Angry John. And that was disappointing. I have no way of knowing if Angry John had just had enough for the night, or if he just didn't feel like playing anymore in a game where there was drama going on between other players. If he left because of the latter, that's actually a little surprising because I figured he would love seeing something like that. But I actually think the likeliest reason he left was he saw that someone in the game was angrier than him, and maybe he felt threatened by that, so he went to play somewhere where he could reclaim his position. In any event, the game looked like it might break. No one else wanted to play short-handed, so we were about to draw for seats, but then some players from a broken game came over, including this young white guy. I never saw him before, but he looked like a reg very interested in poker. In his first or second hand, he raises to 15 in late position. There's one call, and I 3-bet to 75 from the small blind with ace-9 of diamonds. Starting to feel like a 2-5 hand. He thinks a little and calls, and we go heads up. Flop is king 7-8 rainbow, and I have the backdoor flush draw. My hand turns really well, so I bet 60, and he calls. Pot is 270, and I totally brick the turn. It's the 2 of clubs. Now there's 2 clubs. He's got about 350 to 400, I'd say. I still want to keep blasting, even with nothing now, but we're brand new to each other, so I'm kind of just going to give up. I check, and he checks back. The river was the 10 of clubs, so a backdoor flush came. But I got nothing, and once again, I think I just have to give up. I always hate doing that, but I'm just worried too much that this is the type of guy who's just going to call too often if I try anything fancy here. He rechecked his cards before I acted on the river to see if he had a club blocker, but I still just surrendered, and he checked down as well with pocket jacks, no club. So now he knows I'm willing to 3-bet from the blinds without premium hands. And I get the sense that this elicits a huge overreaction from the 1-3 pool overall. Like if you ever go light, even one time, they're just going to assume you're always full of it no matter how much time goes by before you do anything aggressive again. So anyway, right after that, lip filler rejoins the game and immediately starts spewing all the money she just got back from me. And she was being very friendly about it with everyone, which only made this nasty comment she made about me tipping that much more kind of just bizarre. But whatever, her stack is pretty low again. And now, one of the newcomers from the broken game, this other woman, opened to 15 from another gun. I think 2 people called, and I called with pocket 9s again in the small blind. And then lip filler jammed 124 total. The open raiser didn't think especially long, and she called, and now it gets back to me. My first thought was to fold, and while I still think folding is on the table, I don't really like it. I mean, the open raiser was still brand new to me, so it's hard to really say how wide she either is or is not. All I know is her flatting here is just kind of stupid. Because if her hand is good enough to go with against the jam, then she should just rejam herself, especially since she only had about 400 when the hand started. In the moment, though, I thought she could have just had ace-king a lot and doesn't want to put her whole stack in when she doesn't have to, so I jammed. She didn't take long to call, but she didn't snap. And I asked her, do you have a pair? And she says, yeah, so now I have to be fucked. And on the run out, the turn brought a 4th spade. I did not have a spade, but I did have an open-ended straight draw. That missed, as she made queens full on the river to stack lip filler and double up through me. Probably not the most brilliant shove on my part, but I still see why I did it. And actually think there's a chance someone who took this line might have even folded pocket 10s in this spot. But she had a monster and ended up making a pretty fortuitous flat pre-flop after lip filler had jammed. What I kind of wish I'd done is just call myself and play post-flop. Because if the flop comes low, I don't think she's going to bluff ace high. But if the flop comes like ace or king high, I don't think she's going to bet unless she loves her hand. So if suppose I flatted and the flop did come ace high and she checks back a hand like jacks or queens, Now I can bluff her off of an empty side pot, but still play for the main pot against lip filler, who I could definitely be ahead of. Now, calling has its downsides too, but either way, I'm just tempted to play this hand one way or another just because the field plays faced up so often. But then, moments after this hand ended, the reg in seat 1 who beat me with the pocket jacks asks me, "Did you have a spade?" Because if I had, I'd have turned a flush and then lost on the river to the boat. So now this is twice in the space of about 30 minutes where something of mine was on the table right fucking in front of everybody to see, but the person who had something to say or ask somehow managed to not see it. I went all in, so I showed my pocket nines, both of which were red. Now I just lost a big pot for 1-3, and I feel like an idiot because I just got my money and crushed, and now I have a reg asking me this pointless question. And okay, I'm prone to being a prick moments after I lose, but I won't initiate saying anything to anyone. I just don't want anything stupid said to me. And I'm not even as pissed at him for what he asked as I am at him for asking it just on principle. Because it's just like, if you wanted to know that fucking bad, why didn't you just look out at the table when the hands were turned over? He didn't do that. So when he asked, I just said to him, "What do you care?" And what does he care? He didn't play a big role in this pot. But now all of a sudden he'd like to know if I had a spade? What the hell fucking for? What is he going to do with that information? What is that going to change? You know, a little common sense goes a long way in this world, and I just feel like it's common sense here, especially for someone who is clearly trying to win, to not ask questions about the finer and now meaningless details of the exact cards that the loser held in a hefty-sized all-in. Now, when I asked him that with this attitude, he didn't get mad. He actually just seemed a little confused. Then I told him, my hand was turned up before, and that's where this all ended. Now, seeing how he behaved the rest of the night, I actually feel a little bad for talking to him like that because he was gracious all night long in both defeat and victory. Still think it's a stupid question, though. So after that hand, Lip Filler left again to take an even longer break, but the guy sitting 2 seats to her left also vacated, so I took that seat to get position on her. And then the young reg took my seat. Now, maybe he just didn't want to sit in seat 1 since it's right next to the dealer. I know a lot of people don't like that, but I don't care. Why would you ever put the whale on your left? And by the way, it was more than apparent by this point that Lip Filler was a whale. She didn't just punt to me those couple hands. She was apparently spewing hard for as long as she'd been there. And I guess when I first got to the game, I caught her in the middle of a lull, but she was cooking again now. And that's when I realized, no wonder this game was so deep when I first joined. So as the game played on and I got to see more and more of this young reg, he was like the exact profile of a spewy, button-clicking tryhard. He fit it to the letter. He was opening really trashy hands for huge sizes, calling raises from the blinds or any position with really shitty hands, just being a good old-fashioned idiot. And the type of player pros who have done their time for a long time love to salivate over. Now, this is not to say he had zero know-how. He for sure had some. But like I said, he's just a tryhard, overestimating his EV constantly. But a nice guy nonetheless. So after about a half hour, Lip Filler returns to the game and after a minute or two now realizes he's on her right. Then she says to him, "Hey, you were sitting over there," pointing to seat 1. "Now you're over here." He's just laughing. He's like saying, yeah. He had no idea what happened with her and I before. Then she starts saying, like, "Oh, where is he? Where is he?" Looking around the table all over the place and suddenly realizes that I'd moved but 2 seats to her left. And she says, "Oh, he's still here. The guy who said he wants to fight me." I said, "I never said a word about fighting anybody." She said, "Yes, you did. You said you were going to beat me up, and I know Krav Maga." I just repeated it laughing. I said, "I never said I was going to beat you up. You said you were in the Air Force and that you're going to fuck me up." She's like, "I will fuck you up. I was in the Air Force." And I said, "Okay, now you just said it again." And we, of course, have a different dealer now, and he's trying to get this to stop. Then she starts saying, "Run the tape. Run back the tape. He said he was going to beat me up." So I said, "Sure, go back and run the tape. They'll hear everything that you just said, now and before." So the dealer calls a floorman over, and she's continuing to say, "Run back the tape," and I continue to say, "Yes, do that." But after the floor man realized that this had all started a while ago and was now starting up again, then he ordered both of us to stop talking to each other or that we'd be kicked out of the room for the night. So I didn't say anything else. But she said to him, "Wait, can I talk to you off the table?" So they go somewhere for a few minutes. And while they were gone, the woman who I'd doubled up when I had nines and she had queens, I asked her, "Who do you believe?" And she laughed. At first, it didn't look like she wanted to say anything, but then she said, "I doubt you were going to beat her up." I laughed and said, "Thank you," and then briefly brought her up to date on the tea. So when Lip Filler returned to the table, she immediately said, "Is he still talking?" And this is right after being told to stop talking to me. And a comment like that is very much directed at me. And I thought about going to talk to the floor man myself right after she did, but I didn't even bother this time. I've seen this foreman enough, and I know he's competent enough that he can probably deduce what's actually going on here without too much of a struggle. We have a drunken, belligerent woman whose lips are way too big, claiming that I threatened to beat her up about an hour ago, but that no authority had been informed of this until right now. Now look, regarding the totality of this whole situation, I know that none of what I said was completely necessary, beginning with me telling her to shut up. I know I didn't have to say that, but I didn't fucking care. And I know what all of the spiritual people would say, and that is, you're no better than she is by acting the way you are, and her putting you down that way from the start is entirely impersonal anyway because it's just her own bullshit and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I know all that. And I don't mean blah, 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 like dismiss, in a dismissing matter, like it's not true. I know it's true. But I just didn't show up to be a Buddha. I showed up because I wanted a little action, and if I don't want to take this fucking shit from somebody, then I'm not going to. And something else that pisses me off the most about people in general is they want to play hardball until it's their turn to get into the box and hit. They want to fight dirty, but then they complain when they get a dirty fight. So it's okay for her to comment about my tipping, but it's not okay to be told to shut up. It's okay for her to speak to me in a threatening tone, but it's not okay for me to think she's full of shit when I ask her, "What are you going to do?" It's okay for her to threaten to fuck me up because she's in the Air Force and knows Krav Maga, and it's also okay because she's a woman and knows no one will care if she threatens me, only if I threaten her. I've read a lot of spiritual books myself and will continue to do so because I love learning about that stuff. And one of the most important things I've read is what matters is not what you do, but the awareness with which you do it. And this whole time, I can say I was at least quite aware of how overall stupid I'm being by engaging this crap, but I didn't care. This woman wanted to talk shit, and I talked shit back. The end. It wasn't important to me this time that I take some high road because that can be ego-driven too. Just as easily. It's like you're only doing it just to take the high road, but like, you're not taking the high road because that's what you want to do. You want to be like, "Oh, look at me, I'm taking the high road." It's an easy trap to fall into. I know how to ignore people, but I didn't feel like it this time. You don't get to disparage me for how much I tipped, especially when you got the fucking amount wrong. So whatever, the show must go on. Then I open pocket threes from early position to 15 and the try-hard 3-bet to 45 from the small blind. I call and the flop comes 8-6-4, 2 spades, and he check calls 50. Meant to bet 55, but I misclicked. And the turn was, hello, the 3 of clubs. Two-tone board now, and he checks again. Figured I probably had him dead or almost dead. If he has an overpair, which I doubt, he's probably going to check jam against any size. And if he only has an ace-king type hand, he might decide to remain sticky, so I didn't bet that big. I went 80 into 200. And he jams. I don't remember how much the jam was. I mean, it was like just kind of like a normal-sized all-in. It wasn't huge, but it wasn't like a min-raise. So, of course, I snap call. The river's a queen. And he had a 6-5 of hearts. So I turned him and actually had a lot more outs to fade than I'd have guessed. But what I say, he's a clicker. You know, I opened under the gun 1 in a 9-handed game. I've been quiet for a while, and he still 3-bets this hand from the small blind. Not only does he do that, he only 3-bets the pot size, making it almost impossible for me to fold anything that I would open from such an early position. And he doesn't block the hands I'd want to 4-bet with, which he has to expect me to 4-bet more often when I open that early. And then he outflops me and was going to win a much bigger pot if he had turned his gut shot, since I'd have for sure bluffed having it. And if he turned 2-pair, I doubt he folds to me bluffing there also. There were really a bunch of turn cards that would have either won him another bet or maybe made him fold the best hand. Instead, I hit gin and he spazzed. But as I said before, he was never rude. He said nice hand and on we went. Lip filler continued to get killed though. I didn't get into any serious pots with her, but she kept on dumping and then asked for a table change. I think partly because of how she was doing and also partly because of me, even though I kept quiet after the floor came over. She eventually got her table change and then said, "I don't want to get into any more fights today." So, for the first time ever, I ran a fish off the table. And a big one at that. And while I'm sure a lot of the players may have been unhappy about this, I did not care. Because I've said in other episodes, I don't give a fuck if you're a fish. I don't need you in the game if you're going to be a piece of shit. Least of all when I'm just playing the occasional short 1-3 session where just about everyone is terrible anyway. So I was glad she left. So as we go on, the tryhard is having a rough go of it now. He's playing bad, and he's adding on. And then comes a hand where there's 1 or 2 limps. He raises to 20. There's a call, and I 3-bet ace-6 of diamonds to 110 from the small blind. And he's continued to open wide, and even though my hand is a nuisance, I still think it's good enough to squeeze. But of course he snap calls, and we go heads up. Flop was king 9-8 rainbow with my backdoor flush draw, so a pretty similar spot that I was in before when I had 3-bet the pocket nines. Or not the pocket nines, the ace-9 suited. I 3-bet the small blind, the flop came king high, and I have the backdoor flush draw with a hand that turns very well. I think I bet 90 and he called. This time I did turn something. It was the 4 of diamonds. Now I do have the nut flush draw. He saw me give up before, but I've been quiet for a while, and we know he's super wide, and even though he's been spewing, I don't think he really necessarily wanted to call off another 400 here when he was probably light. So I rip. He thinks for a little while and folds. Now, because of March Madness, Resorts World is running a high hand promo where someone gets the draw every 45 minutes. And the bonus is as low as $100 and as high as $2,000. But after winning this hand, I asked, is there a low hand bonus? And I showed the 6 of diamonds. I normally never show bluffs, but being in this game with this guy who, as I said, is the type pros love to beat up on the most, this time I showed it. He's already losing, and now we just folded the best hand. And he knows I got outs, but now he sees he could have had a real solid shot at winning a huge pot, so now maybe this will really tilt him. Then he started to go up and down for a little bit. But then, with about 20 minutes left in my 4-hour session, all of a sudden he got really hot. He ran his stack up to at least 12 or 1300, and I had a little bit over 1100 after being in for 600. So I'm playing my final orbit, and then I'm under the gun 1 for my second to last hand. I'm halfway out the door, but now I have pocket kings. So I raised to 15. This Asian woman fish who had a lot for a while before losing most of it to the tryhard, she called. And now our friend in the small blind 3-bets again to 75. Now we're close to 400 big blinds deep, and he'd never used this size before for a 3-bet, so that's 2 good reasons to 4-bet him. But the Asian lady was really short at this point, so if I opt to call and let this go 3 ways, she's not going to make life difficult because she had barely over $100 when this hand even started. Now, even though he went bigger this time, I still didn't think there was enough reason to think that he can't be light. And if he is light, calling is going to perform pretty well post-flop. Now, if I 4-bet and he 5-bets to any size, I mean, I'm just going to go with it, but I was thinking about what I said in episode 1 about how you start getting a little apprehensive at the end of sessions where you're not necessarily that eager to get your stack in. But then again, I also have pocket kings, so my hand isn't exactly weak. I think 4-betting probably makes a little more sense since he may still peel with hands I have crushed because he's such a clicker who seems to put himself in bad spots almost intentionally, but I don't know. I was worried he might fold since I hadn't 4-bet the entire night, and now I'm doing it after he knows I bluffed him. So I actually thought I might be giving myself up by 4-betting. And that flatting would just induce a lot of fuck-ups from him post-flop. So I call and the lady calls. The pot is $225 and she has like $40 left. The flop is Queen 10-5, all clubs, and I do not have a club. Try hard checks. I bet 140. The lady calls all in, and he calls as well. So the main pot has about 345 and 200 on the side, and I've got about 900 left. The turn is an offsuit 9, and he checks again. And I really like this card. If he has jacks, with or without a club, I don't think he's going to want to fold. Same story if he has queen jack, king queen, ace queen, club or no club. I thought he could have ace king or ace jack with a club that wasn't the ace. I mean, I guess he could have the nut flush draw with those hands, but I thought he would likelier bet the flop if he had the ace of clubs. And I thought the same thing if he flopped a set of queens or tens or a flush. And he checks again, and I'm thinking, I gotta be good here, but how big should I go? Well, I thought about jamming, but instead I ended up overbetting by going 650, leaving myself with 250 back. And before too long, he jams. I mean, I don't think I can fold, even though, wow, holy shit, because now there's actually a chance I'm dead, but there's also a chance I'm ahead. I'm getting over 8-1 now, and I just don't think I can fold after taking this line. So I snap. River is an offsuit ace, and he says 2 pair, which he flopped with Queen 10 of diamonds, stacking both of us. I didn't show my hand, so he and the others probably thought he completely schooled me and has no idea just how sick he had to run to get this result. Now, as far as his line pre and post flop goes, I'm not criticizing anything he did. Like I said, the guy had some know-how, but he's just so out of control constantly. But it all worked out quite nicely for him now. Now, if you listen to me, then you know how seldom it is for me to show a bluff, but oh my God, it's just so fucking mystifying at this point as to how often I show a bluff on what rare occasion I do, then only to find myself in a spot like an hour or two later at the most, where the person who I just bluffed and I think I might be setting up now suddenly gets a perfect spot against me. I mean, here I am thinking he's fallen for it, but no. He's just at the top of his range with one of hardly any of the hands he's going to play like this that has me beat, and I have one of hardly any of the hands that he beats, but that I still feel okay to go with. I don't necessarily think he checked the flop to trap me. I think he just didn't want to bet and be raised, which is smart. But after I mucked at showdown, he said something like, it's too late to fold 2 pair. I don't know what he said. It was something like that. So 2 hands, right before bed at almost 3 in the morning, I get stacked in a fucking $2,300 pot on a night where I was trading blows all night long and getting threatened with Krav Maga in the Air Force, only to be told I was the one who did the threatening. I was about to win over 500 for the night, but instead, I'm down 600, and I just left after that because I was soul crushed. And then everyone probably congratulated him for how brilliant he played and talked about what an asshole I was to that woman for running her off the table and how karma got me. Yes, of course. Well, look, it's not important that anyone knows how good he had to run to stack me there. In fact, it's better if they think something else, because isn't that the art of poker? Getting others to think things that aren't true? Even in the face of heartbreak defeat, that's still the name of the game to me. Now, I obviously play poker for money, but I ultimately play for the game, and this was one of the most demoralizing, shell-shocking moments I've ever had. It doesn't matter the pot size. It doesn't matter I only lost 600 in the night. It's the way this whole night unfolded. So after that, I just went for a walk for a while because I was in a mild state of shock. And a little hard not to be when you consider the trajectory of this whole night. So I went to the Wynn, got some free chocolate, and then I almost sat at 10-20 with the $20 big blind ante. There was no 5-10 going, but I was so tilted that I almost sat in these stakes, which I haven't played in probably at least a couple of years. I don't even remember. The game did look pretty good and lively, but that's not the point. These are not the circumstances in which I should be playing this game. It's quite the opposite, really. So it's unprofessional. Because this is not the way a blueprint poker pro would react to something like this, so I'd be embarrassing myself had I done so, no matter what the result is. The only thing to do was just accept the fact that this guy hit some crazy full court shot at the buzzer to beat me by 1 point and go home. I had 12 outs on that river. Like a sneaky 12 outs. Any 9-5 king or jack, and I'd double up in the side pot. I don't know what the lady had for the main pot, but so what? It was like 1/6 the size of the side pot. Something I do a lot is think about what would have happened had I done X instead of Y. Usually that's in a hopeful effort to make myself feel better about what did happen, if in case I determined I'd have gotten stacked no matter what I did, but had I 4-bet to say 200, which is probably the better move than flatting, I have to figure it's unlikely he folds queen 10 of diamonds because the guy insists on over-battling every spot no matter what his hand is. Stack depth, position, doesn't matter. So let's just assume he doesn't fold and we do go heads up. Flop is queen 10-5 all clubs with a pot of 4-15. After he checks, do I bet here? I don't know. But I sure wouldn't want to be check raised. And a lot of hands that continue are going to have a lot of equity whether they check raise or not. So maybe I would just check. If I do, we know I'm going to be calling a ton of sizes on the offsuit 9, which came on the turn. But then once the ace river comes, if he bets hard again, am I calling? Well, I sure wouldn't want to, but nobody knows the unknown, so I don't know what I would have done. I do think, though, if I had just 4-bet pre, I would have found a way to not get stacked. But whatever, what's the point in dissecting something that never even happened? I think the real question for the night is, did that woman actually learn any Krav Maga, and was she in the Air Force? I'm going to give her the benefit and say yes to both. But that doesn't mean she's still a practitioner. I think the more threatening people actually are, the less likely they are to talk about it. And if they're talking nonstop about what they can do to you or what they will do to you, it's probably just to try and intimidate you because they know that's the most they're capable of. I do get the feeling, though, that this wasn't the first time this woman had an altercation like this with a man at a game. Because from the way she was talking, it almost sounded like she had rehearsed this. Like she knew what she was going to say if put on the spot. Kind of like I knew what to say to Angry John if he got into it with me. But I wasn't thinking the reason I told her to shut up was because it's a woman. I said it because this wasn't a very imposing person. Neither are most men. Now, if he or she looked like the Hulk, then yeah, maybe then I'd have just kept my mouth shut, even though it's probably just as likely that I actually get attacked in the poker room. But twisting this shit around like I'm threatening you because I said, what are you going to do? Please. Things like this used to happen to me a lot more. A couple times in my mid-20s, I was threatened dead at the table. And that's obviously a very unnerving thing to hear, but again, the talkers tend to not be the doers. Still, though, I'd like to avoid having something like this happen again. I mean, it's just, you never know how crazy the person you're playing with really is. So I just try to stay in my lane in Vegas and just keep to myself and not really mess with anybody. I mean, I don't know. I guess tonight I just abandoned all that, but whatever. Either way, for now at least, I have lived to tell the story, so I hope you enjoyed it. But right now, I'm just kind of relieved that I'll be going back to 510 soon. It'll be fun to really compete again at those stakes for the duration in which I feel the interest. And it'll be even that much nicer to not have to deal with any of these small stakes cockroaches anymore, as, I don't think I'll be taking any hands at 1-3 anytime soon. We'll see you next time.